It is hard to keep writing songs or making any creative work after graduating from college or uni, if you were lucky enough to go, or even just after the first few exhilarating years of making music and art. In this video, I want to share with you the 3 most important things that I do in my creative life that help me stay productive as a songwriter and have helped me really build a career that has now spanned over 20 years. These 3 practices are personal to me, but I've come to believe over the course of my life doing them that they can help anybody who's struggling to do creative work on a regular basis. Before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about me, and not for the purposes of, waving my banner around, but more to give you a sense of who I am as a songwriter and where I'm coming from. I graduated from the Berklee College of Music in 2007, where I was lucky enough to have Pat Patterson and John Mayer amongst my mentors and teachers while I was there. Since then, I've worked as a professional songwriter. I've also taught in the songwriting department at Berklee. I've taught courses for Berklee Online, and I currently teach songwriting courses at the Australian College of the Arts in Melbourne, as well as at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music's Open Academy here in Sydney, Australia. In the last 12 months, I've had 10 songs that I co-wrote with other artists and bands commercially released. One of those bands, whose album just came out in the last month or 2, has had over 2 million streams on Spotify, which is not bad. I've also got an 8-song album, some co-written, some original, coming out on an audiobook being published by Penguin Random House next year. But most importantly is just that I've written about 18 songs in the last 9 months. The point of telling you all of that, and it's a bit cringy to just put my credentials out there like that, and I apologize, but the point of telling you all of that is to say that the 3 techniques or methods or practices that I'm going to share with you are the pillars of my creative practice that help me stay productive even when I'm not inspired, even when I'm tired, even when I don't want to, even though I've got 2 kids, even despite all of that, I can still stay productive because of these 3 things which I'm going to share with you now. Number 1 is what I call having a big think. Capital B, capital T. So on a Monday morning, once a month, I take myself out for a coffee, I bring my journal and I bring a computer, and I spend about an hour or 2 hours having a big think. A big think is a chance to step out of the day-to-day details and to-do lists and the minutiae of just getting things done, and really to take a step back and have a big scan of all the projects, all the goals, all the things that I'm doing, just to step back and zoom out. Often what I'll do is start by just listing out all the projects that I'm working on so I can see it all there visually. And what that helps me do is connect to the things that I have been ignoring but that are important to me, but it also lets me see the things that I have been pouring my attention into, and that's just a helpful reflection. I always keep my computer handy so that I can quickly research ideas as they come up. I can also send emails to people who are connected to ideas that I have. I also let my mind wander, and it generally happens pretty naturally, especially when I take myself out to a different space and I'm not surrounded by all the objects of my daily routine. It was during a big think in June this year when I was really looking at what I needed and what I wanted, and realized that what I wanted to do was start my own songwriting group. I had been a part of a different one, but there were various things about it that weren't working for me, and I just realized I can start my own. And that songwriting group has generated now about 80 new songs from the 8 participants in the last 6 months, which is pretty awesome. Taking myself out for a big think is really a way to connect not just to what I'm doing, but why I'm doing it. And when I allow myself to think about that, I get very inspired and very motivated, and that tends to drive me through the next couple of weeks. It will then peter out and I will absolutely get mired in the day-to-day grind, and that's why I take myself out on a regular basis. Number 2, bilateral movement, which means movement of both sides of the body, with a capture resource. So let me explain what I'm talking about here. I only discovered this about 3 years ago when I started going to the gym on a more regular basis. At that time, I had also been hired by a band in Melbourne to work with them on their album for commercial release. What I found was when I went to the gym and was moving my body in bilateral motion and flooding my brain with oxygen, as well as stimulating my brain by listening to music that was unrelated to the project, but also thinking gently and lightly about the songs that we were writing and trying to problem solve around them, that my brain would fizz with creative ideas in a way that I cannot reliably replicate in any other way. And this happens when I go for a run or go for a brisk walk. It's the bilateral motion and the oxygenation of the brain, plus this kind of stimulation thing, that will always give me ideas and give me answers a lot of the time. And honestly, this has not failed me a single time in the last 3 years. The other part to this bilateral oxygen stimulation thinking little thing that's going on here is making sure that I have a capture resource, which is just a fancy way to say my iPhone. But just being totally fine with being that person who is running along, sweating and heaving and singing or speaking into my iPhone, or running along and awkwardly typing lyrics or ideas into my phone. I just do it. And part of me wishes I could compartmentalize these things, you know, exercise over there, creative ideas over here, but I've just come to accept that these two things are one and the same, that when I am most creative is when it is embodied, when I'm actually doing something physically with my body, and I just accept that now. Those two processes belong together, and I'm just going to be the weird person whispering and sometimes yelling into my iPhone. So if you are struggling to move an idea along or to have any ideas, or you're stuck in the middle of a song, I really encourage you to try this out if you never have. Do a little bit of bilateral motion, flood your brain with oxygen, listen to some music, think gently upon your idea, and make sure you have something to capture ideas with. Number 3, get yourself a regular writing group, which is another way to say set yourself up with some soft accountability and a community in which you are creating work on a regular basis. After I graduated Berkeley in 2007, I moved to LA and I was working as a songwriter, but I was finding myself very creatively stifled and limited, which is a really common experience for people who have just graduated. At that time, I also came upon the book Art and Fear by David Bayles and Ted Orland. If I had one superpower, it would be to magically grant access to this book to all people who have just graduated from a degree in a creative discipline or are in the early stages of their creative life that once upon a time was really exciting and now is really difficult, and I would also grant them the will to read it. Bayles and Orland are very direct in the way they state the problem. Once you have graduated, or if you're someone who has not had the opportunity to be in a community of people who care about the same thing you care about, the problem is this: there is no longer people around who are paid to care about your work, and you no longer have the structure and routines to help you, or force you in a lot of cases, make work on a regular basis, and so you just stop. The other problem is that there's no special venue for your work. And by venue, Bayles and Orland do not mean stage or gallery or any physical space. Venue simply means a space, and particularly a community of people who are there to receive your work and give you a little bit of constructive feedback. And this, my friends, is the most important pillar of my creative practice, is having a community of people with whom we have an agreement that we will make work on a regular basis and send it to each other. And it doesn't have to be a big group. You can start with one other person, and that is great. Okay, so how do you meet other songwriters or writers if you don't know them already? My biggest piece of advice on that front is to take an online class where you can meet other songwriters and feel out who you might be interested in starting something like this with. And like I said, you only need one person to get it going. I will link in the video notes below some online classes that I think are great and some other resources that might get you into that community setting where you can find people who are doing the same thing and interested in the same process. So now let's assume you've got one other person who has agreed to be in your writing group, or you've joined a writing group, of course. You can find them. I'm sure if you Googled, you could probably find them as well. So you're in a group. Here's how my songwriting group works. I am the host of the group, at least for the moment, and every 2 weeks I send out a prompt to all the people in my group. Prompts recently have been things like rabbit hole, good enough, a flaw in the plan, holy. These are things that come from I don't even know where. I just collect interesting phrases or words that tickle me and actually don't mean anything specific to me, because I also want to be surprised by the writing process. So I send out the prompt. Everyone has 2 weeks to write a new song that is inspired by the prompt. It can contain the prompt or it doesn't have to. It can also be something that has nothing to do with the prompt at all, as long as it was written in that 2-week period. The song is due by midnight 2 weeks later, and then we start the whole process again. We do 10 songs over 20 weeks, and then we take a break for a month or two, during which we can pick the best songs or our favorite songs and develop them a little bit more or produce them up if that's what we want to do. Here's the thing. In the last 20 weeks, I have written 10 songs. Are they all good? No, they're not. But you know what? 3 of them are okay. And with a little bit more time and attention, they could be really good. And that is about 1,000% more productive than I was in that few years after I graduated and was really struggling. I heard this described as the 70-20-10 principle by songwriter Jonathan Mann, who has written a song a day for over 12 years. I can't even compute how many that is. But the idea is this: 70% of what you write is going to be mediocre. 20% is going to be complete crap, but 10% is going to be awesome. And the more you write, it turns out the bigger that 10% is. So that's it. These 3 things, the big think, bilateral movement, and having a regular writing group, are the 3 pillars of my creative practice that have helped me write and stay creative throughout the year, regardless of my level of inspiration, regardless of my level of busyness otherwise, and have really helped me build a career and a creative life as a songwriter. In my experience, and in that of so many other writers and thinkers who are way more experienced than I am, creativity is not spontaneity and inspiration alone, or even mostly. Creativity is really the habits, processes, and environments that you create for yourself. And those are things that you have control over. As the saying goes, if you want to get hit by the train, you got to stand on the tracks. And I hope that these are 3 tracks that you can go and stand on. See you next time.